Hi, I'm Diane, and I'm here with Say Can You See? We're part of CTV, the Society for Economic Equality. And this is a very important issue because the drug wars, the drug wars touch on our economy, and they touch on every institution and every part of our life. It ruins people's lives, and that's very distracting. It ruins people's lives, and it's something that we can change very, very easily. And here at my side is Jacob Regan, my panelist.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, by the
way.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
it's
it.
great. It's such an interesting topic, and I'm so glad that you're here because I know you're really interested in the topic, as everyone in the United States should be, because our society is being ruined by our oppressive drug laws. And this is not an even-handed show. We're not going to show both sides of the issue. We advocate for decriminalization of as many drugs as you can possibly, or substances, or plants, flowers. We don't want anything that grows out of Mother Earth to ruin people's lives, to have a criminal penalty attached.
Yeah. And just like we were talking about before the show started, this issue is very complex, and there's multiple issues that really intersect into the one issue of the drug war as a whole.
Right. And even if people don't take drugs, I mean, everyone takes prescription drugs pretty much, or an aspirin, or drinks coffee, has a beer in the evening. Those are all drugs. And in fact, that's where I want to start. I was at an event yesterday, and there was a woman that said, "Oh, marijuana is really bad for you. They've done studies." And I was like, "What?"
You're like, what studies?
What studies? So I said, well, there's a lot of people that don't agree with you on that, and just kind of let it go. But I really looked up, is it harmful? And that's where I want to start. Is marijuana use harmful at all? We know because medical marijuana in the state of Michigan has been legalized for use for people that it can help medically. So we know that there's many, many medical uses for marijuana. Correct?
Correct.
So, like any drug, or plant or herb, there are good uses and bad uses to put it to. So we're well aware that marijuana has good uses. In fact, they just added another use for medical marijuana to the registry.
Which was PTSD, correct?
PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and marijuana has helped many of our veterans and other people who have had post-traumatic stress, maybe have gotten molested in childhood.
And really, I really like that was added, just because it really moves away from the use of pharmaceutical drugs, which the harms associated with pharmaceutical drugs, as we all know, are much more than even cannabis.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where we come in. When people say, "Oh, it's harmful," I want people to remember it's an herb, it's a drug. It is not an avocado. It's not an apple. It's a drug. You can't compare. Oh, apples are always good for you. Marijuana is not always good for you.
Yeah, it's just like any other substance. We look at caffeine. We look at alcohol. If in excess, of course, it's going to cause harm to your body. And that's the one thing, like we were talking about earlier, is even having the ability within this country to really provide a health-based approach to how we're dealing with drugs within our society.
Absolutely, and that would be fabulous, but we're not doing it. In fact, it's so bizarre that some of the things that we have that are legal compared to cannabis, which is not legal. So I looked up whether it was harmful or not. First of all, cannabis is not physically addictive. It's not addictive, say, like heroin is addictive, physically addictive. Chocolate chip cookies can be psychologically addictive. You can drink too much water. There's lots of things we can get psychologically addicted to. But cannabis is not physically addictive. And people who have decided that they wanted to stop using cannabis, they don't even get a headache. They don't have any withdrawal symptoms at all. It's not like you have to tie yourself to the bed like you do with alcohol. Big withdrawal symptoms. Coffee, people get headaches. Cigarettes are
But do we have
very
people
hard to
being
quit.
arrested for caffeine use?
Absolutely not. And so, number one, it's not physically addictive. It's just as addictive as anything that you might, like eating. I'm trying to think of the going down the reasons it would be dangerous. It does impair short-term memory, according to studies. However, it impairs short-term memory just about as much as one beer impairs short-term memory. And when the cannabis high or the beer wears off, you get your memory back, right? So you might forget where you put your car keys if you've had a joint or if you've had a beer, but it's not a long-term thing. So that's, if you think if that's something that needs to be, people's lives need to be ruined for, then beer should be illegal, There are lots of people, and I really thought about this after that woman said this last night. I really thought about, there are lots of people whose performance, their intellect, their success are fabulous, and they're regular pot smokers. I mean, I don't know if you know.
And that's one thing, even with a lot of propaganda throughout the years, is a lot of times, just from a lot of the older generations, they hear, oh, marijuana, and they're like, oh, it's bad, it's bad. And the one thing, even throughout all the advocacy work that I've done throughout my time of being involved in different projects, is I don't try to promote the use or possession of cannabis to any extent. The one main reason I choose to be an advocate, a social justice advocate for this issue, is because I've really, through working with Decriminalizing Grand Rapids, from even collecting signatures, it's time and time again I'd talk to one person and they would say, I got a felony, and as a result I now have issues gaining employment.
Can't vote.
Yeah, and can't even vote, and even with so many different negative effects associated with really a destructive policy.
It's not a destructive drug. It's a destructive policy, and that's absolutely right. That's what's negative. But anyway, just thinking about the genius. Cosmos. This is the TV show that just started. They're going to have 9 segments about how fabulous the universe is by an astrophysicist who's at the top of his field, and he's following Carl Sagan, who was a scientist at the top of his field. He was pothead, right? If you're going to tell your kids don't smoke dope because you will not succeed, you will not be smart. He's brilliant. Everybody knows who Carl Sagan is. Michael Phelps. He won 8 gold medals, right?
Yep.
8 gold. I haven't won any gold medals. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
but,
me neither. It's just amazing.
8. That's a lot of gold medals. He was caught smoking dope, right?
And they got all blown up.
And everybody got all upset. Oh no, it's going to ruin your life. Well, he gets 8 gold medals. Fabulous athlete, right? And I was just thinking, if there was a man, I heard him speak. He was a sports writer for the Grand Rapids Press, and he got arrested for marijuana growing. He only grew enough for his own personal use. It was a big problem. He was a writer for the press. No problem with his writing. Didn't commit any crimes. They monitored the spike in his electricity use. Figured out he might have been growing something in his basement. Almost ruined his career. This is a writer for the Grand Rapids Press. It didn't have any problem getting a job, keeping a job until that, and they still kept him on.
And even like you just brought up, it's like when somebody gets in a pinch with law enforcement, it's like it can destroy their entire life, and especially if they've the one main thing that always comes to mind with arrests and cannabis on my end is, and I don't know if you're aware, is let's say a young person happens to get a felony charge, they lose the complete ability to financial aid. So it's like, so
can't go to college.
You can't go to college.
No.
You want to pay out of pocket, which these days, who has that money?
Yeah,
Nobody really.
It's really tough. There's so many ways that we penalize people for what? For nothing. Now I'm going to get to some things that are dangerous. This is the worst one, and I've heard this from people. Smoking pot may cause weight gain, right? it lowers your blood sugar. People want to eat. They want to eat junk food, lots of carbohydrates. So that's kind of a problem.
Sounds like a serious issue.
Well, it can be. I mean, people can die of obesity, but they won't die of pot smoking. They'll die of obesity. But I have a friend that's her biggest issue. She said she stays away from junk food, no fast food, doesn't stop at Taco Bell unless she's been smoking marijuana, and then she eats it. And that is enough to make her stop smoking. So that is a big problem. But
at least she identifies that, though.
Absolutely, and that's what we all have to do. And if you have the information that what the real risks are, you can identify the real risks.
Yeah, but even with real risks, and earlier you brought up the whole end of even education, like drug education within schooling. It's like we're teaching our children in saying, oh, cannabis is 100% bad. You're going to die. And then let's say teens go through that whole experimental stage of things, and they're like, oh, I didn't die. And then it's even like, what other things within this education is flawed? Right.
Well, one of the articles I read pointed that out even more so, because they pointed out that that when there's an educational system that says, oh, marijuana is just as bad as heroin or cocaine or tobacco or anything like that, and you smoke it and there doesn't seem to be a problem in anything, then these kids are saying, oh, everything they told me was wrong, so I should just, heroin's probably okay, and tobacco's probably okay, and alcohol's probably okay, and all these things, because that's obviously a lie, because there's no real problem with that. Mm-hmm. So it basically tells our kids, which may be good or bad, that all those other things in the drug class, are, if they're lying just as much about them, maybe we should try some heroin tomorrow,
Policy-based over really like health-based education.
Absolutely, it's not scientific. Another thing that you might not, if you need to have information about, especially if you're a woman or a young woman, is that your inhibitions might be lowered on marijuana. So if you're with a young man you do not want to have sex with, it might be good, alone, it might be good not to have that joint with him, not to smoke marijuana. It would also be good not to drink alcohol with him, not to be alone with him, or on any other substance that might lower your inhibitions. This is a drug. So those are choices that people want to make. Oh, I might not want to go in this bedroom with Jamie and smoke that doobie because I don't want this to get out of hand. That's a rational choice we could make. Or drink that fifth, or do any, shoot up, or do anything else. But if we don't have the information, we can't make the rational choice. That is a drug. For people who are extremely anxious, might have PTSD, lowering your inhibitions and anxiety about a situation would be very good. If somebody can't eat, they have no appetite, and they're wasting away because of a disease, something that increases their appetite might be really good. Chemotherapy works like that. People lose their appetite, and when they smoke marijuana, it really helps them with their appetite. And it's a drug. It is a drug. It's not an apple.
Exactly.
You have to be aware of a good way to use it. They say driving. Don't drive and smoke. Don't drive and drink. Don't drive if you're not in your right mind. Don't drive and take prescription medication. Don't drive and take Sudafed. You know, it's going to make it's going to impair your judgment.
Yeah, it's really about making that responsible choice.
Right, but if you only hear the scare stories,
then how can you make that responsible choice?
Correct.
You have no choice because you have no foundation and base to make that responsible choice.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. When I really looked up the dangers, that's what I saw. Another thing they said is that I'm going to say this, cannabis causes cancer. So does red dye number 3. It's not as much of a cancer causer as tobacco, which is legal, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of cancer-causing substances in our food, in our drugs, all over the place. Yes, if you smoke as much as Bob Marley did, which was a pound a day, you might have a problem with cancer. If you don't smoke a lot, if it's just an occasional use on the weekend, it's not going to be a problem. So, yes, you might hear somebody running around saying, "Oh, it causes cancer." You would have to take a lot. Just like a mouse would have to take a lot of red dye number 3 to get cancer. But red dye number 3 doesn't give you anything, whereas there's lots of health benefits and relaxation benefits with cannabis. You actually take it for a reason, not just because somebody slipped it in your food because they want it to look pretty, right?
Yeah, even like even tying even a whole nother issue even to the drug war is even talking about how even in the United States in 2010, how African Americans it's almost 4 times as likely to be arrested than a white. And
that's a whole
it's wild.
big thing.
Because when you even think about it, it's like, let's think about it in like the Grand Rapids sense. It's really like police officers really targeting certain areas to find those easy arrests.
Well, I'm going to say this is CTV, Oh Say Can You See, and this is a call-in show. I don't know if we have our wonderful tech guys have our call-in things up. And I do want to say that we have a link. That's our call-in number. It's 459-4881. If you want to call in with a question for Jacob, who knows a lot, and me, who knows a little. And we will try to answer any of your questions on cannabis or cannabis legalization that you have. The link that's up on the TV now is a link to our Ustream, and this show will be archived at that place. And if you have any friends that don't have a TV and are suffering because they can't watch this live, they can go to that link, and there's our YouTube, our Twitter account, and our Facebook, and you will find that link up on those places. So there are other ways besides television to watch this show. So feel free to call in with your questions. That the whole targeting thing is really a big thing, and where I want to go with putting cancer-causing chemicals, say, in our food without us knowing it, is that when you take a drug that your doctor prescribes, or when you drink a bottle of Jim Beam, you don't know what's in that bottle. Some corporation mixed that together. Whereas if you grow something in your backyard and smoke it, you know what's in it, right? It's a leaf, right? It's cutting down. It's kind of like growing a garden in your backyard and growing your own vegetables versus patronizing the agribusiness conglomerates. They're going to put all kinds of junk in your food, right? All kinds of junk. There's 700 chemicals in a cigarette, You know,
It's crazy.
It's crazy. So what you're doing is you're maintaining that power structure by going to the supermarket, by going to the drug companies, by going to the alcohol companies for your consumption, the tobacco companies, instead of growing your own tobacco in your backyard and rolling a joint. It's probably going to be, growing your own tobacco is probably going to be illegal one of these days. They don't want us to be empowered to do our own recreation, to find what works best for us. They want us in their system. You know, they want to give us what they think we need. It's our right to not be criminalized because of this drug. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as targeting people, every undesirable element of society had a drug that they scared people with. And marijuana was the drug that they scared the American public about marijuana and gave it this weird sounding Mexican name, right? Mm-hmm. So we would hate Spanish people that spoke Spanish and came up from Mexico, right? That was the drug that they were gonna kill us with. I see we have a caller, Jeremy. Welcome to Oh Say Can You See? And what's your question or comment?
Well, I have one comment, and the first comment I want to make is just a quick correction. In Michigan, felons can vote. It's one of the states where they're actually not disenfranchised.
Yes, in many states they cannot vote, though.
Yes, absolutely.
And a lot of time also,
Keep going.
Also with that, a lot of felons are told, though, when they get out of jail that they cannot vote here in the state.
Absolutely. And so I just wanted to make sure if any felons are watching, you should register to vote and get on out there and vote.
Yeah, we'll all be felons soon, so it's good to know. But when Jacob went around asking people to sign petitions, people would say, I'm a felon, I can't vote. So
absolutely, and I think that the Department of Corrections actually is engaged in some misinformation when people are released as to their rights, because I know many former prisoners that have said the same thing, that they were unaware that they are actually eligible to vote.
Yep, and that's one major issue too, because when felons don't think that they cannot vote, really it throws out that whole scale.
Absolutely. And so my question to both of the panelists, I guess, is when do you think that other psychedelic drugs, maybe such as magic mushrooms or LSD, might become legal? And if they become legal in some states, do you think it would sort of ripple across the map, being that studies done at Johns Hopkins University have found that of individuals that consume magic mushrooms, 94% of them found it to be the top 5 spiritual and life-changing experience in their life?
Yeah, we haven't really gotten to that topic yet. But there's a real big difference between LSD, which again is made in a lab somewhere with little white powder, versus something that grows out of the ground. I mean, those are really different to me.
Even it's really interesting. Even Jeremy, I don't know how much research you've done into really how they've decriminalized all drugs in Portugal, but it's really interesting even to look at the effects that they've seen, even with a reduce in crime, and even really moving the whole enforcement level from a incarceration approach to a mental health and treatment approach.
Mm-hmm. When people abuse drugs, not use drugs, there's an underlying problem that they might have, like PTSD or like, it could be anything, they might have extreme depression, and because of a reason, and that reason, that's the way they're using it to get treated. They're abusing a drug that should be just used for enjoyment or used for relaxation, and that's how people need treatment if they're going to abuse something. As far as your question goes, as a libertarian, I would like everything to be decriminalized. There's nothing that grows on earth that I think should have a criminal penalty. You can't buy lobelia, which herbalists used to make herbal mixtures, and I used to use it, and it's gone. I can't go down to Harvest Health and buy it because it's now.
See, I'm not familiar with that.
It's just because they say it's poison. Well, if you took a whole bunch of it, it'd be poison, but herbalists don't. They just use a little tiny bit, just a little plant. It helps the mixture. But I don't, I mean, it's, how can you have like the things that we have that are legal? You've got to, a cigarette with 700 different chemicals, which definitely causes cancer, even in smaller doses, which nobody should be using, is legal. And then something that grows out of the ground like a magic mushroom, like a plant, is not legal, ruins people's lives, and ruins certain people's lives more than other people's, which is what you were talking about. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much, and thanks for the discussion. It's definitely
Right,
valuable.
and Jeremy, if we can't get cannabis legalized, which is the least harmful of all the drugs that we know of, there's no drug that's least harmful, maybe aspirin. But actually, if you took 1 aspirin per pound of body weight, you would die. If you smoked that much marijuana, you would not die. Okay, so I guess aspirin is more lethal, so.
Even with aspirin, how it thins your blood also.
There's lots of things that it does that you don't want it to be doing. It looks like we have another caller. Oh, we've got Robbo. Oh boy. Hi, Robbo.
Hello, my good friend.
It's nice to hear from you.
You guys have been waging war on drugs for a long time.
We guys?
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad problem at all. But it's not the problem with drugs. It's thugs.
Yep.
Thugs is the problem.
Can you turn the
Drugs
sound
and
up?
thugs. Still there?
Yeah, we're trying to hear you. I asked them to turn the sound up so we can hear you better. So, do you have a comment or a question?
Well, yes. I have a comment and a question. Do you think drugs are good or bad?
Okay, well that's a very good question. Do you
Thank
think?
you very much.
Do you
I
think?
really thought about it a long time.
And I've thought about this a lot. Do you think knives are good or bad?
Really, is it the drugs themselves that are bad, or is it the policies behind them?
Or the use you put to them? So if there's a knife bad, you can cut your food. You can use a knife to make a cool carving, or you can kill somebody. It's a tool. Is money good or bad? You can use money for very good purposes. You can use money for bad purposes. Anything can be used for bad purposes. Well, maybe not an avocado, but or an apple. But I mean, I guess you could, if a pallet fell on you, you would die. That any tool, anything can be used for good or bad. So I'm going to say a drug that just is a natural thing that grows out of the ground has to be better than something made in a lab by people in a mysterious process that we don't know. We don't know what they put in cigarettes. We can't find out because the Food and Drug Administration doesn't work with cigarettes. They don't know. And I think that some people that have researched it privately think there's benzene in cigarettes, and there's things that make.
I really appreciate your response, and it's really thought out and all that. But do you think? I'm not going to go there. Can I ask you a question about? I live in Washington State. In Washington State, now marijuana is legal. Do you see any sort of process in the state of Michigan where marijuana will be legal?
We have no clue. It's not a question we can answer. And I know you used to live in Washington, and Washington State and Colorado are really dealing with how to bring marijuana into the mainstream, and they're having a kind of a bumpy ride on that.
Because I know even from reading that I've done is really just figuring out how you can still keep the whole medical side of it and yet still have that recreational side and keeping them separate. Because I don't know, in my opinion, I see them as two very, very separate systems. I don't know about you.
Some people are really sick. They need the marijuana.
Right, that's what he's
Some
saying.
people use it for recreation.
That's what he's saying.
And that's one thing, even with, like, I'm guessing most people who are watching the show have heard about like cannabis oil helping children with like epilepsy.
Absolutely.
And that's really much so, because even on my opinion of cannabis legalization is I very much so see for somebody to have the ability to purchase cannabis. In my opinion, I very much so think that they should be 21 years of age. We should also really focus on keeping marijuana away from children.
Well, thank you, Robbo. It's nice to talk to you.
I really appreciate you entertaining my call.
Oh, good.
And I really like your show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you. That's actually a topic I really wanted to get to, is the age. You know, a lot of one of the reasons that people use this drug so young is because it's so clamped down on. There is no legal age. I knew kids that they couldn't buy alcohol, but they could get marijuana because nobody can get marijuana. So there's no age limit, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was easier for them to get. Now, I don't think drugs should be given to 3-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Any drug is going to be bad for you. It doesn't matter what it is. Or a really intense herb that would have a really intense reaction. You need to let the brains of children just develop the way they do, you know, just nicely. I don't think kids should be stuck in front of TVs either, which I also think of as a drug. I think TVs are a drug.
I do.
But used in moderation, it's fine, just like anything. But they have done a study that if you do use marijuana starting too young, it can lower your IQ. This is a study. I was either done I think it was in New Zealand. It was either New Zealand or Switzerland, because we can't do research here in America. It's not allowed. So we don't know from here.
Yeah, and even on the basis of kind of going back to even talking about Colorado and Washington, is even like on a federal enforcement level, we think of you're on the side of the road and you're smoking. It's almost like a cop walking straight past you, ignoring it, but in a federal government sense.
Okay. We have another caller, William. Welcome to Oh Say Can You See? Do you have a question or comment? And could you turn up the sound in here?
Yeah, hi, I am here. I was just really happy that you talked about keeping drugs and substances away from children and people that haven't fully developed into their body and are still fragile and should be cared for and looked after. And I also think we should consider if, creating these substances for consumption in our society happens, if in our economy, there could be adverse effects to the way corporations handle, the affairs of this kind of, function in our society. So I just wanted to leave those two comments, and I think you're having a good discussion, so please continue.
Awesome. Thank you for calling, William. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And, that is something I wanted to get into, because there are negative studies on young people. If you start marijuana use, according to these studies, and I don't know if you've seen them or not, but I was really trying to look for dangers. If you start at 21, there's absolutely no adverse long-term effects. Does not lower IQ. It does not affect one adversely. If your brain is already completely formed, your paths are set down. It's only with young, very young people, and at 21 you're okay. And I think that young people, if they see that they're going to be able to smoke at 21, won't mind as much. But if they, if it's always going to be illegal, why not try it when you're young?
And even kind of getting into the whole aspect of how much money we're spending as a country, even in enforcement costs, and really tying into, like we spoke about earlier, even thinking about currently here in Michigan, what it's like. I think it's something like $8,000 to $10,000 a year we spend per student on education, and then we look at we're spending close to $30,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. It's like it's time. It's really truthfully time to find where we need to focus our resources.
Oh, absolutely. It's much more expensive to go to prison than even college. They might as well they could send someone to Harvard for what they get for putting them in solitary confinement or arresting people for no good reason. But that brings us to, there's one other study I want to talk about as far as dangers go. It is harmful to people if they start marijuana too young or anything. I mean, you just don't want to start a young person on something that's going to change their way of seeing. But they did do a study where they, alcohol, if somebody this young person had 5 drinks twice a week, it changed the white matter in their brain. And I know people that drink 5 drinks twice a week. And I know young people that drink 5 drinks twice a week. And we probably all do. It actually changed the brain. And then they studied, as a comparison, somebody who smoked 9 times a week, smoked marijuana, and they found that there was no brain change. It didn't affect the white matter at all in their brain. And so physically, the physical brain, they looked at, the brain with scans and things in this study, and it did not change. And another study that was done was they found, and this was a Swiss study, they found that that students who smoked marijuana and tobacco were likely to have really negative outcomes. They lost interest in school and lots of things, and they tended to abuse alcohol, and they tended to not be interested in athletics, and just all the measures that we'd think of somebody being healthy. They didn't have it. They were just going down the tubes. But they studied students who only smoked marijuana and did not smoke tobacco, and they were just about the same as students that didn't smoke anything, that completely abstained. So only smoking marijuana and not the tobacco with it, they were more interested in athletics. There you go, Michael Phelps. They were more interested in academics than either other group. So it was, I wouldn't say that causes anything, but I would say that there's a correlation, and that's something you do not hear about that study.
That's a really amazing, sounds like an amazing study. I actually personally haven't read that before.
It was pretty recent, but I was really trying to look for something bad because that woman had said that. And the studies were great, and somebody said that's not the study that you're gonna see on the media in America. You're just not going to see it. But anyway, I mean, there are so many things to talk about with marijuana, and I want to go back to they're targeting certain groups, like black people in the ghetto, get much stiffer, 4 times the sentences, and they're stigmatized totally.
Yeah, and even with that, you look at mostly, let's say, areas that are being targeted are areas of really low financial earnings, and really with that, how can especially younger people have proper representation within the criminal justice system when they have so little funds? And then when they're offered a public defender, a lot of the times, I won't use the word forced into plea agreements, but essentially forced into plea agreements because they can't afford the level of justice that let's say somebody that lives in another side of town could.
Absolutely, it's like a form of redlining, where, you know, certain low-income neighborhoods didn't get the loans, didn't get the business loans, they didn't get real estate favors. They had to take the worst financially. And I want to remind everybody, this is Oh Say Can You See? We're talking about drug wars, and this is a war of all against all. It's a war of countries against countries, us against the government, us against each other, us against our institutions, institutions against the individual. This is drug wars. The drug is the tip of the iceberg. It's something that we can see. What I wanted to say about that, when we were castigating when we were prejudiced against Chinese people when they were like coming into San Francisco and building the railroad in the 1850s, 1870s, we were saying that we had a Chinese Exclusion Act, and we were saying that Chinese people were no good because they were opium smokers and they smoked in opium dens. And when people were coming in from Mexico and we wanted to hate them, we'd say, oh, they're no good because they're marijuana smokers. That means they're no good, lazy people. And we didn't call it hemp, which everybody knows is a rope, But we gave it that every targeted group has their drug. I mean, poor white people have meth, that every targeted group has their drug that they're kind of tarred and feathered with. And in the black community, now we have crack versus cocaine, which gets a lot higher sentence, and just drugs in general for poor people. But Michelle Alexander in her book The New Jim Crow talked about how putting people into it's kind of like the school to prison pipeline versus the school to career pipeline. That when you have something that's an instant bust, mandatory sentencing, it's just a substance that you have that's some natural substance. Now, if I'm a political activist and I shoot my mouth off, and somebody wants to target me in my community and shut me up, they'll just plant some marijuana on me, right? Good way to get rid of the occupiers. Good way to get rid of the activists. Good way to get rid of the troublemakers, especially in minority communities. You just put some pot in their car, and you've gotten rid of them. They are gotten rid of, and that's the trouble. What I see, one of the big problems with the stigmatization that accompanies the drug penalties. I mean, we're troublemakers, We could go home and find some pot in our car. And when we say, officer, we don't know how it got there, they're going to say, right, yeah, Yep. In fact, that happened to a woman in Grand Rapids. She moved into a house and somebody had left marijuana in the house or some kind of drug, and she went to jail.
Oh.
And she had no idea.
How long ago was that, do you know?
I heard about, if anybody has heard about this case, please call in. It was pretty famous. I heard about it on the radio. I heard an interview with her. It was shocking. It was just, it was really hard.
Do you even know how long
out.
she went to jail for?
She was there for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And she had no clue, it was just, we have to do this, ma'am.
And then she has that whole mark on her record.
Yeah, she was,
It's too bad.
She had meetings she had to be to. She had, and she was in jail. They said, "Oh, just come down to the station. We've talked to you about something." That was it. That was it.
I'd definitely like to actually read more into that.
Yeah, well, I think I heard it on Reasonable Doubt, so I'll ask those guys about that. But it was shocking. It was shocking. But that's what happened with Michelle Alexander. She was there. There were crooked cops. And they were planting marijuana on political activists and just sending them in jail. But when you have something like that, where the power structure is so unequal, people are gonna abuse it. Think of how much money, and this is we were talking about as well, is in the drug war. Why we want to keep this going? How much money is in illegal substances? You keep it illegal. Who makes the money? The Mexican mafia, right?
Yeah, but even on the level, and kind of a topic that we haven't even covered that much, There's
so many.
Just webbing out. But even bringing up the whole like asset forfeiture level of things,
Right.
and it's even thinking about how, let's say you're caught with a small amount of any substance. Right there, you can have your car taken, you can have your house taken,
Kids,
DVD player, TV, and right there, that's even more funding for police stations. And really, budgeting wise these days, a lot of police stations are really depending on that asset forfeiture money really in their whole operational budgets.
absolutely, absolutely. It's a way to get money, and it's a way. And the people that when the money stream is coming in, they don't want it to stop. I've heard it, the beer lobby does not want to see marijuana. The alcohol lobby, the tobacco lobby. There's so many companies that don't want to see marijuana legalized, and it's less harmful than all those things.
This disrupts their profits.
Disrupts the profit stream. All that stuff. The prison companies, don't want to see marijuana legalized either. The CCA, private prisons, don't want to see that legalized. It's just like detention. It's just like immigration as well. But our economy is based on the drug war. Our whole economy. It's so hard to change it. Think of the drug companies that don't want to see marijuana researched. They don't want to see marijuana used. If you take a drug for a condition that you have, it has side effects that also have to be treated, right, by other drugs and other providers. The medical establishment makes so much money on all of our conditions. They don't want to see that easily treated by something that would help and doesn't have side effects, right? There's a lot of money there too.
There is.
Okay, well, feel free to call in. I'm really happy. I'm encouraged by all our callers. This is such an interesting topic. Our number is 459-4881. Gosh, there's so many things. I was really thinking about ecology too. The fact that we chop down trees to make paper, we can make it out of hemp. But we don't want to do that because somebody might smoke something. That industrial hemp could save our forests. There's lots and lots of uses for, and there you go, mushrooms too. And people were saying we could save our forests by inoculating trees with mushrooms, and then they would all live in perfect harmony, right? There are so many things. Just the natural food movement. People want natural food. They want to go to their small farmer for their food, for their meat, for their milk, for their chickens. They want organic. But then you're going to take a drug that your doctor prescribes that has all these chemicals and all the side effects that are really, really hazardous and dangerous. How can you say you're a natural food person if you're taking something that you don't know what's in it? Literally, you don't know what's in it. Whereas marijuana is a leaf. Come on, it's a leaf, guys. Okay, and we're getting towards the end of our show, and we haven't even made a dent in the drug wars.
There's so, like we talked about before, there's so many other side topics to all of this, and we've kind of jumped around throughout the show.
Right.
But even on your aspects, like what do you think is the solution to really ending the drug war?
Well, one of the things that really breaks my heart is when I read about the violence in Mexico. Seriously, people getting murdered, that because of drug wars, because of all the corruption, that we're corrupting all these other countries to feed our illegal drug habit. And it doesn't have to be that way. People don't have to die all over the world because we have illegal drugs. Now that, I think that's one of the saddest aspects. Also that people can go to jail just like that for nothing, just for having a plant. And there we go. Boy, that time went fast.
It did. Wow.
Talk about organizations. One of the organizations I'm really impressed with is LEAP, and that's Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And they are former and current law enforcement police officers, judges, people on the law enforcement side of things that are against prohibition of marijuana. And some against all drugs, but definitely marijuana. It's the least offensive of all the drugs. It's the one that should be legalized tomorrow, today, yesterday.
Yeah, no, it is an amazing organization. And a lot of those people, I truly give a pat on the back, because going from being on the enforcement end of things and moving right into really identifying those key issues with our policies and really willing to speak out about it. I've actually had an opportunity to watch a lot of actually awesome videos of judges, former city attorneys,
mayors. I saw in the New York Times, I think it was Monday, there's a New York Times editorial by a former mayor calling for the end of, definitely cannabis, but most drugs. He wanted legalization, and it was, I can't remember what city he was from, but it was really awesome. It's the New York Times, Monday, St. Patrick's Day.
Awesome. Even bringing up, are you familiar with, what is that, marijuana majority?
I saw it, but I didn't look into it.
It's actually really, really awesome. What it does is it gives really local officials, state officials, the opportunity really to speak out. And on this entire website, it breaks them down and gives a quote of really what their opinion on this whole issue is.
And the different issues, right? One of the things I definitely want to bring up, since we haven't even talked about marijuana in the news, but the Democratic Party in California now has officially voted that part of their platform is the legalization of marijuana. And I think they did that because Jerry Brown, the governor of the state, came out against legalization. And the party went, whoa, he doesn't speak for us. And they voted to put it in the platform. So
that's awesome.
It's
going to be interesting to see over the next 5 years really how that plays out, because I really feel like it's going to be it's just like different legalization initiatives. It's going to be a domino effect, even with people in different political parties using it as a platform.
Okay, let's see if we can kind of capsulize this stuff, because we're coming to a close here. And this is Say Can You See? You still have time to call in. If you missed part of the show, you can go to our Ustream on Docast, and if we can put that up on any of that, you can go to our Facebook page, and it'll have the link to this show. But we do not advocate the use of marijuana. We don't advocate the use of anything that's illegal. We do not want you to get in trouble. We do not want people to get in trouble. We advocate the legalization of marijuana. Mm-hmm. And we think it would be best for our society on all levels. The only way that you can die from marijuana is if a pellet of marijuana falls on you and you suffocate to death. I mean, that would be it. There's no known death.
Yeah, and even the one thing that we didn't really get into earlier, even on a cannabis legalization end, and how much money it would really save taxpayers on an enforcement level.
Oh gosh, and the enforcement and the taxes that are coming into Colorado now are in the millions.
What was it? It was like $1 million in the first few days.
Yep. It's wow. It's millions, and it would be better for everybody. It would be better for the people who are getting murdered in Mexico. It would be better to have the money go to your local farmer than to a Mexican drug lord. It would be better to cut the profits of the drug companies. It would be better for medical to have people's real problems treated, instead of them having to go to jail. It would be better to not have that on held over our heads, that anytime they want, they can take our stuff. The police can take our stuff because they found drugs that we might not even know how it got in our possession. There are so many ways that the drug war hurts all of us, economically, politically, in every institution, educationally, ecologically, personally. We all know people who have had problems with the law because of marijuana. I knew someone that got shot because the police came into his house and shot him because they thought he had drugs. I mean, it's that guy at GVSU. You probably
Yep.
know him.
That's still with that. That's
Yeah, I was really.
It's
I mean, there are
wild.
so many reasons to legalize marijuana. You want to have the last word, Jacob?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Once again, it was great having the opportunity to jump on the show with you this evening, and like I said, we jumped around, and I feel like we did pretty well with kind of hitting every aspect.
Lots of different ones. Absolutely. Well, call in. Go to our Facebook page. Go to our Ustream, and thank you very much for watching, and thank you to all the people that called in. And there we go. And we could talk about this forever.
We could.
Absolutely. There's so many things. I think we hit most of the
We
things
did.
we wanted.
Even on the level even on that level, like we were talking about, of drug education.
Absolutely.
It's really if we can bring if we can bring true education even into our schooling.
Right. So I thought that was really interesting in the article. It said that once they give you that lie, they're gonna give you other lies. Oh, whoa, this isn't true.